Hello everyone. Let us now discuss part 2 of chapter 2, the Egyptian civilization from your class 6 history and civics. In this part, we will learn about the characteristics of the Egyptian civilization. The main characteristics of the Egyptian civilization are town planning, buildings, architecture, and engineering. We will learn about each of them in detail in this part. Let us begin with town planning. The use of urban planning in ancient Egypt is a matter of continuous debate, which means the historians are not sure whether the ancient Egyptians knew the concept of urban planning or not, whether their towns were planned or they just organically set up the way they are. Well, some Egyptian cities were planned, while some, like Memphis and Thebes, grew organically. First, we should know that by the term planned city, it means a city or a town which is strategically planned, which has highly developed roadways with high connectivity, and planned markets and residential hubs. Cities were planned based on proximity to a water source. Here in Egypt, the water source is River Nile, and the height of the location above the flooding of the Nile. As we already read in part 1 that the areas beside Nile river was flooded, because of which it was fertile. Thus people built their city at a height above the flooding area. The cities were divided into upper and lower regions. Here, the southern portion is known as upper region and the northern portion is known as lower region. There were a few broad parallel streets running north to south, cutting at right angles by narrow streets dividing the city into blocks or grids, which means the roads were not built or constructed randomly. They were constructed in such a pattern that the roads would cut each other at right angles, dividing the city into blocks or grids. For better understanding of the concept, look at this picture. This is a picture of city of Alexandria. Here you can see some lines crossing each other at right angles, forming small blocks. These lines are actually the roadways, and they were built in this pattern, separating the land into small blocks. But this pattern did not remain the same. Over the years, even planned cities were reduced to an erratic jumble of houses, alleys, and courtyards, as rebuilding the houses through the centuries changed the original grid pattern of the cities. Another characteristic feature of Egyptian civilization is buildings. There were two types of buildings. One is dwelling houses and the other is public buildings. Let us first discuss dwelling houses. Houses were built around the crossing of two major roads. They were made of sun-baked bricks. Bricks are still used by people to build houses. But the difference is today's bricks are cooked and the Egyptians' bricks were sun-baked. Almost all the houses had flat roofs. The number of rooms in the house depended upon the status of the people, whether the families were rich or poor. While most of the common people lived in a one or two room house without bathrooms, the richest people lived in three-storied houses, usually made of stone, with as many as 30 rooms with bathrooms, gardens, and pools. As average house had three rooms, a courtyard, and a kitchen area. A narrow staircase led to the roof. The windows were small and were placed high up close to the ceiling to keep out the sun and let the daylight enter. The royal palaces were enclosed by high walls and were separated from the rest of the city. Some were surrounded by moats for added security. The next type we have is public buildings. Temple districts were better planned and surrounded by high walls. The Egyptians were very religious. For them, temples were sacred places. Thus, the places where there were temples were planned and were protected by high walls. The layout was basically symmetrical. The temples were massive structures with huge gateways. Another very important characteristic feature of Egyptian civilization is architecture and engineering. Architects and engineers built remarkable monuments such as pyramids and temples. The Great Pyramid at Giza, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, is a feat of architectural brilliance. Another architectural wonder is the Sphinx, a mythological figure with a body of a lion and head of a human. It is carved out of a single block of stone. No doubt it is one of the greatest architectural wonders of Egypt. Here is a diagram of pyramid towards your left and the Sphinx towards your right. Looking at these pictures, there is no doubt that the engineers and architects of ancient Egypt were brilliant and highly skilled.